Hi cuties. In today's modern society, every console generation we get, the gap gets closer and closer to PCs, and it seems like the jump from consoles isn't as large as it used to be, with many PS5 and Series X games also getting last-gen ports where the only real difference is the graphics just looking a teensy-weensy bit more poopy. But I'm old as fuck. I'm an aging 22-year-old man, and I can remember a time in which I'd go to GameStop and beg my broke mother to get me fucking Tony Hawk or whatever when I was completely unaware of her financial situation in the Great Recession of 2008, because I was like 7, bro, and she'd have to settle for the cheapest copy she saw. Back then, my poopy little gamer brain didn't realize that every copy of the game wasn't the same, and looking back on it now, it's wild to think that for most of my life, I thought Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 looked like this. And this is the game we're actually going to start with. So Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 released on PS1 and PS2 in 2001, and this is actually a case where it's mostly the same. The levels are all there, albeit some little changes sprinkled throughout, like Canada being completely different on PlayStation 1. But on the last gen port, there's no pedestrians and no moving vehicles, which makes the game super eerie and foggy and gives it some liminal space swag. There's only 12 songs in the PS1 port, and if you're like me and as a dumbass kid you threw your cases away to stack your discs, the game would be so scratched you could probably only hear a good 4 or 5 of them instead. The PlayStation 2 port had the yummy new engine, which gave it 60 frames per second and creamy graphics, and it also added the most important piece to Tony Hawk in my opinion, the revert. This single trick allowed for all those crazy million bajillion point combos, and surprisingly enough, this also made it to the last gen console as well. So all in all, this is a port where if a kid got the PS1 version instead of PS2, they'd have similar experiences to the rich bastard Timmy at school who used to fucking bully me for having Harry Potter glasses and made fun of me for my buck teeth. Dead Rising was a groundbreaking, boundary-pushing zombie slasher with tons of giggle funny haha moments with Frank West, who covered wars, you know, fighting psychopaths and endlessly chopping zombies down in all their Xbox 360 glory. But for some reason, 3 years later, Capcom decided to drop the same game in the Resident Evil 4 Wii engine and titled it Dead Rising Chop Till Ya Drop. Fucking incredible. Now, this game is a super dumbed down version of Dead Rising, completely taking away the non-linearity of the original, substituting for basically Resident Evil 4 with the Dead Rising skin on top, like for real. Instead of picking up 17 shotguns at once, Frank actually keeps ammo. Instead of fighting Cletus in the gun shop, he is the gun shop on this Wii version. Don't get me wrong, this is actually kind of crazy to see. None of the original Dead Rising guns are in here, and they're replaced by the Blacktail, Red 9, and yada 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 whatever Resident Evil 4 guns. Not to mention the aiming is straight up over the shoulder Wii Resident Evil 4 gameplay. There's also no photography in this, which is crazy because what the fuck is the point of Frank being a photographer at this point? Capcom wanted this port to sell 500,000 copies, and they sold enough to maybe buy some pocket lint and Snickers bars with the profit instead. This is just so bizarre. Why did they take 3 years to drop this shit and half-ass it? I really do not understand. This is a last gen port where you are simply not getting the real Dead Rising experience by playing the Wii version, and if you somehow played this instead of the 360 port, I'm gonna bully you like Timmy did, you fucking pipsqueak. Speaking of pipsqueaks, now SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom is no joke probably my favorite 3D platformer of all time, and as a kid I got all the Patrick Dirty Socks, stacked up racks on racks of shiny objects, and got all the golden spatulas. It's so good they decided to remaster this masterpiece and keep it relatively the same. You know what they didn't bring back? The dogshit Windows and Game Boy Advance versions. Yeah, let's start with the PC port. This is literally just a series of mini games, and it's entirely point and click. I feel like maybe some child out there could have been happy with this, but they definitely didn't know their grandma cooked their childhood by not forking up her social security cash to get them the best PS2, Xbox, or GameCube port of it, bitch. As for the Game Boy Advance version, it's a simple side scroller. Duh, bitch, it's a Game Boy. I've played a bit of this, and yeah, it's obviously entirely different, but it's kind of charming. It reminds me of the PS1 SpongeBob game. But both of these ports are dog shit compared to the magical home console versions, and I recommend picking up the remaster if you haven't and shed some tears to peak vidya gaming. Okay, let's get spooky and scary with some Silent Hill 1. You're probably thinking, if Silent Hill 1 came out on the PS1, how the fudge could there be a last-gen port of that if the PlayStation 1 is the first-gen? Game Boy Play novel version, come on. I mean, this is literally just a graphic novel that was only released in Japan, but there is now a fan translation if you really wanted to quote-unquote play this. There's slight interactivity, and you get 2 different playthroughs with Harry and Sybil. handful of puzzles, but I mean, this is nothing to write home about. It's like 2 hours if that, and it's like $120 on eBay, bro. Suck my taint. Quick bonus game. Konami also did this for my favorite game series ever, Metal Gear. They managed to make an interesting port of Metal Gear Solid 1 using the original 80s Metal Gear game swag. It is a neat little 2D overhead stealth game that's set in a different timeline and doesn't follow MGS1's plot, but it's still really cool, and I wish Silent Hill got something similar to this instead of reading a picture book on a Game Boy screen. These TikTok Gen Z Fortnite-loving stinkheads have Spider-Man on PS5, but us old heads grew up playing and loving whatever random-ass version of whatever random-ass Spider-Man game that got released that year. Let's talk Spider-Man 3 specifically. This game was released on PS3, Xbox 360, PS2, PC, Wii, PSP, Nintendo DS, and the Game Boy Advance. Bro, what? They had 3 different developers and basically 4 different versions of the game. The DS and Game Boy Advance versions are the highest rated out of all the versions on Metacritic, what the fuck, but the PS3 version has to be the best simply for this moment alone.
Help! Please! Someone! I'm going to die!
JK. But I grew up playing the PS2 version, and I stand by the fact that the suits are cooler, the swinging is better, the moveset is yummier, and it just overall played better using the Spider-Man 2 engine, bro. I don't care. Despite releasing in 2007, Spider-Man 3 is such an ugly game on 360, PS3, and PC, and is not too much better than the last gen versions, and even takes away the feature of being able to switch between the regular and black symbiote suits. Like, what the fudge, man? The DS and Game Boy Advance are, what do you know, side-scrollers, but they have a lot of charm, and the Game Boy Advance version is a pretty sick Metroidvania with the web swinging intact. The PC port, despite having the opportunity to play it at its best graphical form, plays like absolute piss-ass with terrible cameras on the web swinging, and it's overall just a plethora of jankiness and stankiness. I want to just say too, they continued to do this with Web of Shadows, Edge of Time, Shattered Dimensions. I mean, so many children probably cried at Christmas time when they started playing their Spider-Man game and it looked like this stank-ass shit. Speaking of stank-ass shit, Call of Duty. No, not Duty, and no, not Modern Warfare 3. Call of Duty on DS specifically. They made handheld ports of COD 4, World at War, MW2, Black Ops, and MW3. While these ports aren't mind-boggling, there's certainly nothing to scoff at. Being able to play COD on the same console Super Mario 64 DS is on is impressive, I'm sorry. Black Ops on DS is probably the best one simply because it had online multiplayer, 16 missions in the campaign, and zombies mode, bro. This is damn near a separate Black Ops game that is feature complete on the hockey puck handheld. You gotta respect it. I'm gonna cheat a little bit and take this opportunity just to rant about Resident Evil Deadly Silence. You're probably thinking like,
Oh my god, Jack the Ripper, the original came out damn near a decade prior. How can it be last gen?
because technically, it could be the last gen port of the GameCube remake, and because I fucking said so. This is my video. I do what I want here, alright? Resident Evil Deadly Silence is a super faithful recreation of Resident Evil 1 with cool little gimmicks like being able to swipe the screen to slash your knife and do CPR by blowing in the microphone. Many would agree that this port of Resident Evil is the best way to play it now, especially if you're a Resident Evil remake hater. Not me though, not me. So many quality of life improvements like being able to skip the door transition cutscenes, quick turns, manual reloads, and yada yada solidify this little hunk of junk as the best way to play the origins of survival horror. If I ask someone, hey, did you play Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by chance? They'd probably say, yeah, I remember that back on PS2. But little did their dumbass know, I was obviously talking about the Game Boy Color turn-based RPG Final Fantasy knockoff version, dude. Or maybe, just maybe, I was speaking about the Game Boy Advance puzzle game version where all you do is move barrels and play the worst version of Quidditch humans ever crafted. No, but seriously, this is legitimately the most infamous when it comes to games with multiple versions. It was on 8 different consoles, originally starting on PS1 and Windows, and then they decided to remake the game using the sequel Chamber of Secrets 7th generation engine, and by doing so they reused so many assets it ended up not being that similar to the PS1 version at all. Ugh, I'm out of breath, bro, damn! I could really do this shit all day. Like, it's insane how back in the good old days of the 2000s, nobody complained about this shit, and we all accepted like, yeah, I don't know what version of this game I'm about to get. Who cares though? Harry Potter. Before I give y'all some final examples that I think are quirky and cool, please enlighten me in the comments if you've ever been bean-boozled by this gaming epidemic. I'm so curious to see what I missed, and I'm not just trying to farm some comments. I'm just so curious, bro, please. Star Wars: The Force Unleashed. One of the greatest Star Wars games ever was released on Xbox 360 and PS3, but also PS2, Wii, PSP, DS, PC, whatever. Okay. Oh, Jack the Ripper, that's a normal amount of ports. Well, this is an interesting case to me because on the Wii version, last gen, they added multiplayer and motion controls, which have actually been immortalized forever with the newest Nintendo Switch port of the game. Surprisingly, instead of using the newer gen version on the remaster, they actually used the Wii port instead, and it's better off for it. Sure, the Wii port doesn't get the DLCs and boohoo PP graphics, but how wild is it that we got a remaster of a last gen port in 2022? Maybe it's only nuts to me and you guys want me to shut the fuck up, and that's what I'm gonna do. I guess, all in all, I think it's kind of jarring and also kind of sick that not too long ago games would release with multiple versions. Meanwhile, people complain now when their game isn't 3800 megashits and 17 teracocks. I think if a game released with multiple versions today, the publisher would get fucking sued instantly. And honestly, I think I understand. I love y'all so much, and I hope you enjoyed this silly little vidya. Seriously, comment some of the best examples of this phenomenon if I missed any big ones, and drop a last gen port on the like and drop a remaster on the subscribe, and I love you guys.
Bye.